to Dungeon Master, where we see the last episode of Star Wars as it breathes out its ambiguity of good versus evil, and the rest of the Sinai Desert is closed. In case you were wondering, there is a giant on my back. A giant on my back right now is the song he's probably singing. But that this is silent is the only way we could encapsulate Dungeon 40 Dungeons to Freedom. And that's what I hope stays as the title, for the title maker has lost his edge for rooting which episode, which part, which quarter half of Dungeon Master we have somehow made it to 40 and have left not but wanting another episode. And that was yesterday that we made one, or was it the day before? It doesn't matter. Dungeon Master is always ready and aiming for a look at a cartoon that reminds him of the mythologies of his existence. And that we're looking at this as though it's not public domain, but that it actually is public domain, is what we discovered in the previous dungeon. Was a dungeon we could actually look into and have no problem. That there's a singing calf, I don't mind, because it's that land dweller up there that sang among his gypsy spree, and with a horse you'd often sing to beat. So the horse goes off on its own course, and then he tries to kiss a horse and falls on his head. And that's what most do when they're searching for their friends under a hole or in a vacuous space. Suddenly paradigm is black background, and then he looks in, and suddenly we're seeing something that looks like not quite an offensive joke, but something kind of slapstick, just upside down and backwards, kind of funny things are happening. And Dungeon Master does not want to promote any sort of lewd behavior at the Dungeon Master table. I had been asked once, like this particular thing we're seeing had been asked once, if I had ran a dungeon the Dungeon Master way, and to that I said, well, in Amsterdam I picked up habits to run a real Dungeon Master, but it was only to parry for my life. But in America, the land of Dungeon Master, we Dungeon Masters become permanent Dungeon Masters to lead all through AD&D, and that high wizards of the coast also have Magic the Gathering to pass around. Doesn't make me any prone to wonder if there's going to be level ups in these cartoon domains that seem so dungeonous but are so public in the domain that we can see the origins of cartoon history and still partake in its wonderment. And that things are happening before my eyes that I've never seen from this angle, or this aptitude, or this correctness of what we're seeing, as though it's really happening, as though in our universe we've seen these things occur before, and that I never had a chance to really get used to how funny these cartoons are. It makes me ridiculous to even know that this dungeon is led by our cartoon friends, and that our friends, they're the only ones that would throw a metal tin can over our head like they did for that guy. And he's sprucing up his gentle bit in that was just a gun in his hand, so we're going to have a little argument about using that clip, but we'll probably use it. And then we have Bugs Bunny over here, and he's going like, you just said the name of the character that we didn't know you were using, but that it's public domain. Let us not call any of these animators old, because we know that an animator stays as young at heart as an animator is 20 years younger than they really are, because it's taken them 20 years on their first project. And then the next few get to be 18 and 17 years later on their projects. So it's a full paid long ride through animation history to see one that got off as a character designer so easily, because they had to render this character thousands of times before they found it. And really, I don't know if one character renderer had to test them all, but that would be a very rigorous job. Not to be trifled with, so that they came out with this Master Bugs Bunny is quite all right with me, and I hope they know at Warner Brothers, too, that I feel nothing but strong emotions for their whole company and would always pay them back on any level they've ever given to me. They're a great studio, and may they live through it all, and they always have, and that's why I've always trusted Warner Brothers, my friends, because like Wizards of the Coast, they are powerful, but they are friendly, and they want to get work done. So, I'm not saying you should submit every student film to them. No, they wouldn't have time, though they'd probably find them good. I think instead you should freelance a film, full package to them. Now I'm giving too much away on Dungeon Master. We must now revert not from my tips on going into a studio, but this is why we thank thee for existing, Warner Brothers, and that you have given this public domain symbol out means we might get by with this chop suey version of this cartoon that we're seeing it from different angles, but definitely the camera's on the right of the image, which is going to the other side, and now we have proof that that's all, folks, is coming up to register. That I don't think we've seen the last of that cheer song Chesney kind of feeling. I wonder if there are more things in this one to watch for. That last guy, was that Elmer Fudd in some other relationship? Have these been colorized, for instance? Is there a way to see if these were the original ones, and that it's Eye Freeling makes me wonder, and Carl Starling makes me wonder if it was later in the 60s that they made these, but these seem like the very first ones, and weren't those the inventors of the first ones, that it would have to be if it was public domain, or did they make a set that was specific for public domain? Well, that you can't do that because it just takes age of time of existing, and that these cartoons we saw as a kid have now become within our grasp to go through the dungeon they're promoting, see a threshold guardian at the mythological fair, and join hands with what is to be the early episodes, or the public domain, dungeon domain episodes of Bugs Bunny. And I'm not saying Bugs Bunny is a warranted register of Dungeon Master. That would be a foolish thing to say, but that Dungeon Master thanks the license and corporation of Bugs Bunny in respect of his owners, because we have remained with a PG-13 rating. And so far, everything's in grasp of featuring itself to sell the episode we're spinning. And this episode here is on the GJ tilt. That we've got a little bit of this guy brandishing his suit. Bugs Bunny can't be seen. That he's touching his nose and messing with him is funny, especially though he's dressed as a Boy Scout leader or something. That he's being humiliated by the bunny without the bunny really revealing itself. Except for there's a shot if we could take it. It seems accurate enough to get head on with the subject-object correlation between him and where he looks and how he talks to the register. That we're not hearing any of this is of no problem, because my music technician, took the night off, and that she's going around town looking for amulets of some sort that she needs for a ring noise that we're using in our next Dungeon Master, and so the music technical work was never put to ploy on this Dungeon Master. But there is a way I thought of that I could maybe manufacture a little bit of what I do, but alas, for now, I'm enjoying this too much because this dungeon hasn't even changed since we've been here. That it's been between cartoons, yes, they have changed on the real, but the Dungeon Master is not some kind of conditioned response to the movies. No, we're exact opposite. We're the freedom to allow the movies to change what they mean, only becoming more like the meaning of art and cinema and collision with magical colors and realities of our own familiarity upon branding of a cartoon such as this. And that I, Freeling and Carl Starling, did several of the best of the Looney Tunes, as well known. So now that we've gotten through that, let's maneuver a little bit of Dungeon Master into this. Now that the bunny is running to the right and is getting away and is pedaling up the hill and going through the mire and the muck, and then eventually it's night and he goes through a pillar of snow and he comes out the other side and they're both flying along the snow and it's looking like they're skiing or something. I mean, you need to get close up on this snowy slide, and then suddenly it seems like there's other things going on in the frame, but that the actuality is we are still mum-footed on this public domain. And I think it's beautiful to see, alas, what we can do in cartoon mode, and that it shows him underground, and invariably Bugs Bunny has saved the day again and done the right thing, and basically that's to make his enemies completely humble by humiliating them. And that's what Bugs Bunny does to his enemies, is humiliate them. I think we can all learn a lesson from that as to how to truly humiliate our enemies. And I wouldn't mind if that was a moral that I'd heard before and someone else had used. They could use it from me anyway, if I was the first to think it. But that humiliation of his enemies was really what made these cartoons funny. Is a natural reaction to children when they see someone good, almost humiliated, but then humiliate their enemies. They always cheer. It's like a plot point you can guarantee it will always work. That some of these scenes, I'm not mentioning how, for instance, Bugs Bunny defamed his shooting habit, but at the same time he defamed his kissing face because he just kissed him, and that these are made to be hilarious and he's made to humiliate him, and that the enemy of Bugs would be so humiliated by Dungeon Master itself. I think it would be strong if we were to take on Dungeon Master this episode longer. Oh yes, we have just pearled by the pages, and this is the one that makes me not want to reach onto the counter mark to change anything, for it's a whole section of public domain Bugs Bunny. And it's like when we're mining for ore treasure in other films, this is one of the things that comes out of it, because YouTube of the Maze is where we get all of our dungeon mastering from. And I know some people that work for YouTube, and a friend of mine used to run this show and gave it over to me. He said YouTube was the bomb, so I'm just going to trust him, and I already knew that anyway. But I'm just saying that here we are. We've got a character we're somewhat familiar with, totally humiliating his enemy, about to be upbraided by these threshold guardians, which we call everything that tries to be strong and hideous to one's adventure. A hindrance to the adventure is a threshold guardian, I should say. It's hindering the adventure. And these are some things we talked about already, as one my friend who owned a YouTube account would say. And he used to say he was an authority on the topic, but everyone knows Dungeon Master is more important. Because a Dungeon Master, when he used to produce it, he said it was so laughably easy to make that he couldn't believe how hard it was to make. And I said, sometimes I feel like it's so easy to make that that's what makes it hard to make. And then I said, but what makes it hard to make isn't that it's easy to make. Isn't that an interesting comparison, I said. And then when we went our merry way and we had a cigarette, and I thought about dreams and ambitions and how I've got to get through 100 of these dungeons at least, that I'd be going through dungeons for a long time. So please come with me through the dungeons, because there's a lot more to go, and all we're getting now is registers of public domain, which should work on one account or the other. Whether we've struck anywhere with these cartoon landings is remaining not only to be repeated, but expected to be a fine sign from everyone involved, because we don't have any plans otherwise than to use this footage on an elsewhere channel, and that we've made all the agreements and do not know what lies in fate for any of us, but that the whims of YouTube are always watching over us is one of the things we love about them. And so, not that we don't love everything about them and worship the ground they walk on, which we always will. Now, these animals here are coming from cartoons on YouTube, and that they're in an early Bugs Bunny cartoon is one of the most avant-garde moves of the whole collection of Bugs Bunny, being somehow not connected with the Looney Tunes at this point, but we're still already as surreal and strange as the other cartoons. And I'm not sure what I'm looking at now. It looks like it's still something from Bugs Bunny, but that it's a dog with a... Yes, now we recognize it, because if you take a look at these things that are in the cartoon, it starts to bring a memory back, doesn't it, of some kind of respite that this dog must find to meet Bugs Bunny and have him become in his first cartoon. That this isn't his first cartoon, but not even a recall of that cartoon, is because none other featuring the curious dog that found the plant. Only the curious dog can unveil the wisecracking Bugs Bunny. And I'd say this fellow here, he tarries on with his way, but that he's a cartoon that sort of revolves around globules of his own weight class is interesting, because everyone's moving in kind of a way of transportation that is unlike normal. That they're moving around in like blob-like moves is really weirding me out in this cartoon. Anybody else say yes? Say yes, yes. It's weirding you out in this cartoon. So now, we've got the history of time locked down by a puppy who was a Hindu puppy, keeps getting smacked around, and yet no sign of Bugs frickin' Bunny. Well, if Bugs Bunny's not in this cartoon, we didn't really get robbed, because that means we didn't use only that footage, but this footage kind of snuck up on us, right? I wonder what would happen. Well, we don't want to break the stream apart. We have minute after minute of footage ahead of us. And we could go on, Dungeon Master, past almost to a level up. Why, I bet if you gave me 5 minutes, make it 10. Make it 10, Dungeon Master, I'll give us a level up. I have to say that I can okay another 10 minutes, because I'm so intrigued in this roly-poly world of animals that nothing went wrong and everything's all right, and I feel like I'm better off for having been in these dungeons anyway, and a few more minutes of this spelunking into Dungeon Master will take us to the fort and guide us and direct us in our lingerings and our longings and our correctional things we do to inspire hope among others, that they will be there as you will be there for them. Amen, Selah. And now these dogs are sitting here sniffing the door, and this is getting to be a really strange dungeon, because not really dungeony things are happening here, except that these dogs are taking a bath, which is a common theme of dungeons in general. I don't know why, no, I think what the Dungeon Master was trying to say is he never hurt nobody with his version of Dungeon Master, because it's all being user-friendly and friendly. It's a hard game. Not many of my friends got past level 37, and not many of them that are playing that are past level 29 or 29 or 30, that they're all rounding up to the 30s, and then here we are on 40 ounces to dungeon freedom, or 40 dungeons to freedom, never ounces. The dungeons weigh a lot more than that. But dungeons are big, and they have to be helicoptered over here to the set, and we travel through them on a screen, and on the screen sometimes gets bigger on clearer recordings, and then you can see what you're looking at. But on this particular cartoon, you can't really tell if that's like going to become like the futuristic Freakazoid, because for this being public domain, it looks pretty modern, you have to admit. Pretty modern cartoon for it to be public domain, just in the way the animation is so flotational in this screen. I think we got a good one here. I think we caught a winner. Nothing went wrong, and this is like Clifford the Big Red Dog type stuff here. I like this. We got a good kid show now, and like Dungeon Master, of course, he comes on and he makes it an AD&D show, so it's no longer for kids. I heard that, and this isn't for kids anyway, that there's a dog in the sky is cool, but that then actually mad that there's a big dog in the sky is not really working for me. I would have that dog as my own pet. I would have him bring home the logs of perdition and put them in the fireplace and then chant 3 times around him, "He's a magical puppy." Alright, sorry, Dungeon Master hasn't seen his puppy in a while. But that Dungeon Master has many puppies on the puppy farm at home. It keeps him completely mentally stable. And that's why Dungeon Master has chosen such a job, so that he can take care of his puppies. And that's only partially true in metaphor, but Dungeon Master means it in intent. And Dungeon Master's looking for a day like today, like the magic starts today, like, the world-renowned magician stuff. And that I see an inveritable R that leads to an ER, which we all know is a show that Turner picked up later, and that he told me to pick it up for him again. Shouldn't be a problem if I see what I have left after Dungeon Master 40. Sorry, that was that guy from class. He came back in the studio and coughed. That he's got such a rancid smoker cough, no other class would pass him. No, they would. I heard my professor one time cough up a J he'd just hit, and he was coughing, so I can't really tell you who he was, but he was coughing so hard that he coughed later into the speech, the second half of the speech, which was after one of the Godfather movies. Now, I don't think we should track him down or anything. I'm just saying that he was still coughing, and dude, I thought it was cool. Nobody else minded. Nobody minded. I didn't mind that he was coughing a little bit. We were shortening up in a few live ones too. Oh wait, I've gotten too sentimental. Oh hi, I'm the guy from school that he keeps talking about. Look, I just had a class. You should go check it out. But I got to tell you, that was a weird transition, because Dungeon Master became me, and I became him, and that's how shapeshifters work. So back to Dungeon Master. He's my somnambulist. What are those, doppelgangers? Yeah, we got a doppelganger. This is kind of a mirror syndrome this guy's having. Thinking he's Bugs Bunny is kind of weirding me out, but there are symbolisms in these features that do cause us mad breadth. Now, I'm going to tell you all something Dungeon Master wants to tell you, but I get to tell it this time because I want to bet on how I'd still teach class after the end of the world. And I figure if I'm going to teach class till after the end of the world, that's a lot to ask, because what if I don't have a class at the end of the world? Then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll just teach it. If I don't have a class at the end of the year, I'll teach it fucking anyway. And I'll probably have someone that's wants me to teach it that's still my student. And he'll be like my professor too. And then, because we'll be the only ones left at the end of the world, because we're the only ones. Well, there's a few people that I know that would be left at the end of the world. And I'm one of them, and I know most of the people that are that way because they would be the ones to save me from the end of the world, although I would be the one to tell them it was happening. Now, that I get to be a professor after this is a good idea. And I think I could go on for, if I can beat one apocalypse, and I'm not talking about the apocalypse that nearly happened 3 years ago, because nobody beat that. I mean, I beat that, but nobody beat that one. Everybody went down with the ship, except me or whatever. But if it were the real end of the world scenario, like that was, but in every way we've moved on and waiting for the next end of the world scenario to be even crazier that I'm going to live through. On certainty that I'm going to live through another end of the apocalypse, it's going to be post-apocalyptic day on Dungeon Master. And when post-apocalyptic Dungeon Master comes along, out of respect for the Fallout fans, there'd be some Fallout footage. And that I can't abandon the idea of having this cartoon completely take over is a good thought. But then I thought, well, if I can find the hardware, I can bring this back to level. Okay, so we've got this on a tiny little shot. And I'm thinking that since I'm that smart guy that teaches those classes, that all the students that are taking them are really enjoying it. And I wanted us to really enjoy a common theme that we've seen some good cartoons, but that there's something I really, really just can't deny that we've got to see. And I know we're looking at a plain screen here, and this is not the kind of treatment I have for you all, but that this may be the coolest thing you'll see on this whole episode is what's called a level up machine. Because see, we were away in the dungeon next to where we could not coordinate a level up. Now, I think as a stated professor guy, spending my time on Dungeon Master has been rewarding in its own professorly way. But that I don't understand why we're watching like this satire of a nuclear family, that this satire is taking such equidistance from here where we need to be in the commercial, because that it actually turns out to be a commercial for one of our many adventures. The adventure we're taking on now is to scope out the adventure itself. What do you think, Dungeon Master? Level up. I said it before you. Get out of here. Level up. I said it. That this is Fallout. That I knew we could level up to the point of Fallout. That it was in front of us, and that there's a box. What was that crazy teacher doing in here? That we don't need teachers for AD&D. The Dungeon Master teaches all. And you can bring encyclopedias and educational books with you. But don't forget your Fallout manual, because the Dungeon Master Guide, the Hitchhiker's Guide to Dungeon Master, may not breed all the answers you have for gaming. But that Fallout's a role-playing game, and that was the teacher nearby with his cough. That Fallout is an amazing game that should never be rebuked or reborn or resheltered or anything, but kept safe in all of your collections so you can be safe and play the game and learn how to survive in the apocalypse, which I'm going to be making a lot more apocalyptic movies now that it's not the apocalypse again, but it's going to be. That it was the apocalypse means that it will be the post-apocalyptic. Does that anything like the postmodern? Maybe you can explain it, teacher guy. Oh, no. I always field that question back to you, Dungeon Master. Oh, inveritable. All right. You had the choice. You could say that you were going to preach some kind of game and that you didn't know what game it was airing, and then it aired to save all games, and that there was some kind of look to it all. It meant that we were getting distance with games that had already been created but were never created as such. And then we had to do one fantasy move. One fantasy move, and we'll be clear of the subject. The Dungeon Master will come to an end soon. Is not in saying, or is not saying the whole game well, just part 40. And that you traveled with me so far to part 40 means you wanted to come this far and see what they are. That's one of that's the DreamWorks sequence. That's actually above one of my films. It's beautiful. I think we should always admonish the company and how beautiful their logos are. And when they let us use them, and when we pay them back and they pay us back, it seems like such a good company to be in. But we're having a hard time with these commercials and getting us to where we were. So I will pleasantly show you another clip of what I had planned on showing you anyway. And that's not that this is a clip show, but this is the entrance into the dungeon we were just in. So this is cyclical structure. It is diachronic, told out of sequence. And this is the entrance to the dungeon. That the dungeon was made on these hills and valleys and creases and everything. Spawns light into a ferocious nightmare. So if you got that level up back there, as I was saying, that was 2 in charisma, 2 in constitution, 2 in dexterity, plus. 1 in hit points, 1 in strength, and it looks like there was a treasure chest. You open it, there was a helmet made of a skull. But that you weren't wearing it eventually when you wrapped up your horse and made the cartoon come back somehow, and that the cartoons came back at all is no problem, because I'm having a wonderful time wondering if anything is possible, because what could be possible is not always anything that is possible. So keep in mind your grammar, children, because if you're not using it, that's the reason you didn't want to, because it is what it is, and you wanted to go against that, even if that was your reason after the fact, or before the fact, may have been in your subconscious after the fact. And I think we've seen what we can endure from history to days of today to make us feel as though we once had what we once had, and that will be the end of eternity, but not for you and me.